What's up guys, Mike here, the Detroit Borg, and today we finally get a chance to look at the iPad Pro, Apple's largest iPad and its most powerful iOS device. It's available in three configurations, a 32GB or 128GB Wi-Fi only model at $799 or $949, or you can get the 128GB version with cellular for $1079. This effectively means you will need to spend almost $300 extra to get a cellular version of the iPad Pro, which is also the only version with a GPS antenna for navigation. Now it's available in the same colors as the smaller iPads, including silver, gold, and space gray, and we will be taking a look at all of them in this video. The packaging is pretty familiar for Apple. We have the iPad's slender 6.9mm profile on the front of the box and the iPad Pro branding along the side in its appropriate colors. On the back we'll find our specs and details clearly marked, and in this case we have two 120GB cellular models and one baseline Wi-Fi model. First up, let's flip over the boxes so we can slice off the shrink wrap plastic. Removing all the plastic, we can flip over the boxes so we can lift the lids on all three of them. First up is Space Gray with its stealthy black bezel. Next up is Classic Silver with its bright white bezel. And following that, we have the Gold iPad Pro, which also sports a white bezel. Getting to the Space Gray model first, we can see that it's wrapped in a frosted plastic wrapper, like most Apple products launched this year. The iPad Pro feels very light for its size, and at 1.57 pounds, it's about as heavy as the original iPad, which certainly makes it much heavier than the iPad Air 2, which is a little less than a pound right now. Next up, in stark contrast to the Space Gray, we have the silver and white iPad Pro, also wrapped in frosted plastic. And as you can see, in this case, we have a cellular version, which has a white plastic trim piece at the top for radio transparencies. And lastly, we have the gold model, which will match my existing gold iPad Air 2 and iPad Mini 4, which we'll compare it to in this video. This is also a cellular model with a white plastic trim piece at the top. Now, if we had a cellular version of the Space Gray iPad Pro, this piece would have been black instead of white. Accessories are the same for both, including a 12-watt power adapter, which is used to charge the iPad's large 38.5-watt battery, which should last 10 hours of normal use over Wi-Fi. The charger also has a removable wall adapter to add extension cables or international adapters. And of course, we need a lightning cable, so a USB Type-A to lightning cable comes included, which is nicely wrapped up. And lastly, we have a packet containing a SIM ejection tool, something you won't find included with the Wi-Fi models. Inside the packet, we'll also find a quick start guide, warranty information, and some white Apple stickers. Before we take a close look around, let's boot up our iPad Pros to get them set up for the first time. Incidentally, the boot screen on the iPads match the bezel colors for each iPad. Now, like the other iPads, the iPad Pro does incorporate Touch ID, which works with Apple Pay. The setup is a familiar process, and you can skip this if you want and set it up later. iPad Pro unfortunately does not pick up the lightning-fast Touch ID 2 sensor from the newest iPhones. So taking a closer look at the iPad Pro, we are confronted with a truly massive 12.9-inch 4x3 LCD IPS display with a Retina resolution of 2732 by 2048, which is good for 264 pixels per inch, making it the highest resolution display on any iOS device today, but with the same pixel density of the iPad Air 2. Now, like all recent iPads, the display is laminated to the glass with no visible distortion when pressed, although you can see the glass and display flexing if you press firmly. At the top, you'll find the venerable 1.2 megapixel FaceTime HD camera with an f2.2 aperture, which is good for 720p HD video. This is effectively the same camera we've had on recent iPads for a couple years. Down below, we'll find our home button incorporating Touch ID, which is covered in sapphire glass and surrounded with a color-matched metal ring, which acts as a capacitive trigger for the Touch ID feature. Along the back, you'll find no major design revolution here. It looks like all the current generation iPads with a rigid all-aluminum unibody frame and a polished color-matched Apple logo at the center, which is once again a standalone component and not etched into the metal. So again, nice attention to detail. In the upper corner, we'll find an 8-megapixel iSight camera flanked on either side by a set of dual microphones. The camera is also the same one we've seen for a few years now and is good for 1080p HD video with autofocusing and software stabilization. Along the top edge, we'll find the power sleep wake button, and nearby we'll find a set of volume controls with a polished indent between them. At the opposite corner, we'll find a headphone jack with a color-matched insert. And at the bottom, we have a lightning connector, again with a color-matched insert and metal surround. On the cellular models, we'll find a nano SIM tray on the lower right side with an Apple SIM already included. This SIM can actually be used to activate a number of services, so you don't need to purchase a specific SIM for each carrier. You can basically set this up under settings. The iPad Pro also features a radically different speaker design than previous iPads, with speakers at all four corners. The iPad actually has resonance chambers milled into the metal frame and covered with a carbon fiber cap. This creates a very dynamic soundscape and lower resonance, which creates a much fuller and immersive sound. The iPad can also adjust speaker output depending on orientation, which means the speakers always sound balanced. Now, with these resonance chambers, there is a noticeable amount of vibration in the chassis, especially with the speakers at higher volumes. And if you're holding the iPad in landscape orientation, this means your palms are near these speakers, which can distort the audio even with another set of speakers to compensate. Audio does sound really impressive, and it's certainly the best audio experience on any tablet today, but my only complaint is that audio sounds a bit distant or muffled and not as crisp and clear as a set of front-facing speakers. Also unique to the iPad Pro is a new Smart Connector, which is a set of pins integrated into the side of the iPad, which can provide a data and power connection to accessories, such as the official Apple keyboard case or third-party cases like this Logitech case. This means accessories don't need to provide their own power and no Bluetooth connection is needed. It's all powered by the iPad through this connection. This is particularly nice for backlit keyboards like this Logitech keyboard, which would otherwise have to be charged frequently in order to maintain that backlighting. In terms of specs, the iPad Pro is packing Apple's new A9X CPU, which is a dual-core processor clocked at around 2.25 GHz with 4 gigs of RAM. This leads to a very impressive Geekbench score, besting the single-core scores of the iPad Air 2 and the Mini 4 by a significant margin. Even the multi-core score clearly beats the triple-core A8X from the iPad Air 2. And believe it or not, the iPad Pro actually bests the MacBook by 1,000 points for both the single-core and multi-core score. iOS 9 is effectively the same experience on all iPads, but the screen real estate and processing power makes effective use of iOS 9's multitasking features. Now we have slide over that allows you to peek into apps by swiping in from the right edge in either portrait or landscape orientation. Or we can swipe to expand them for side-by-side windowing. This is only available for apps that support scaling, which includes all Apple apps. But effectively, this allows you to interact with two apps at the same time, and iOS 9 handles this very smoothly and seamlessly. Perhaps the biggest software tweak for the iPad Pro is the new software keyboard, which is nearly the same size as a full-size Apple Magic Keyboard. That's because we have this large screen to work with. Now, this new software keyboard adds a number row at the top, in addition to conventional punctuation and function keys like Caps Lock and Tab. Effectively, it's nearly identical to a classic Apple Mac keyboard with a few tweaks and omissions. This makes it easier to type on the iPad Pro keyboard like a traditional keyboard, but it's still hard to get used to since there is no physical feedback, and it's hard to maintain your fingers near the home row without resting your tips on the glass. Unfortunately, especially in the iPad Pro's case, you can't split the keyboard for thumb reachability like you can on the iPad Air 2 and iPad Mini 4. The camera app doesn't add any new tricks from previous iPads. We still have time-lapse and 120 frames per second slow motion. We also have video, which is still at 1080p with pretty good software stabilization, but no continuous autofocusing while recording. The still camera does have a burst mode, but no live photo feature like the new iPhones. So in terms of camera quality, once again, we have an 8-megapixel iSight camera on the back. Again, an f2.4 aperture, but if you combine that with the new A8 image processor built into the chip, we get really good results here. So images come out really clear and crisp with good exposure and color reproduction, although color tends to be a little washed out here. That's also the case on the iPad Air 2. We also have pretty impressive low light performance here, especially for a tablet. So images come out relatively clear and smooth. The camera is able to find focus fairly quickly and accurately, and we don't see a lot of that artifacting or interference that happens when overprocessing low light images. Video also looks great here, so Apple has really good software stabilization. There's no optical image stabilization here, but we do get excellent results in terms of handheld video. The only problem with this camera is that we do not have continuous autofocusing, so you will have to tap the screen to adjust focus if you change your shot. But again, video comes out clear and crisp with good detail, color reproduction, and exposure. So overall, a great camera system, very much like the one on the iPad Air 2. The iPad Pro is a significantly larger tablet than the iPad Air 2, and especially the iPad Mini 4. In fact, the iPad Pro has 70% more screen real estate than the iPad Air 2. Now, compared to some of Apple's laptops, the 4x3 iPad display is actually much larger than that of the MacBook, and it's closer to a 13-inch MacBook Pro. And once you start adding keyboard accessories, this actually turns into a fairly large laptop. We also get a host of new accessories for the iPad Pro. The two biggest ones are the Smart Keyboard. We're going to have to take a look at this in a separate video because it's not launching alongside the iPad Pro in retail stores. We also have the Apple Pencil, which is a stylus designed specifically for the more sensitive touchscreen of the iPad Pro. Again, we'll take a look at that in a separate video. We do get some cases for the iPad Pro, including a silicone case available for $79 in charcoal gray or white. We can also pick up a matching smart cover for $59, and just like other iPads, it magnetically attaches to the side of the iPad and folds up and puts the iPad to sleep or wakes it up. Ultimately, the iPad Pro is a tough one to categorize. It means different things to different people. For me, it's a laptop with LTE and a touchscreen. To others, it's a digital sketch pad or a bigger display for media consumption and gaming. But ultimately, it's a more powerful tool than before, but its size and heft means it's not really just a larger iPad Air. Using the iPad Pro is a very different experience, so the challenge for an iPad shopper is to determine what they need or what they want from their tablet or laptop. Alright guys, so before I go, what I want to know from you guys is how would you use your iPad Pro? Let me know in the comment section below. Alright guys, so that's going to do for me in this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video.